Good morning, everyone. Isn't this an odd sight? What a weird thing to put in a newspaper. I've got a couple of short stories before we get into the longer form stuff. But I saw this yesterday and I thought, if some teacher took my kid and sat in the middle of the road to teach them a lesson, I would lose my mind. I would lose my mind. This is not, take them to the back part of the school where, you've got lots of green space and places to sit and learn rather than on the road. Please stop. What in the world? The Ottawa Citizen says, get creative about education and send the students outside. Yeah, like out a roadway. Morons. Just unbelievable. I sent this to my brother. I reported on this probably last week. This is the mural in Calgary. And so the original mural was going to be painted over, and it was, hold on, let me see if I can find it. Okay, I found it. Here's the original mural, and they were going to paint over this for a Black Lives Matter mural using $120,000 of Calgary tax dollars to put this mural up, okay? And then the pushback was a lot. Everybody said, this is, everybody likes this mural, let's keep this mural. And they went looking, and they found a different place to put their mural, the new Black Lives Matter mural, and they've put it in Chinatown. And Kian Bext says this. So if you were wondering what the Black Lives Matter artwork looks like, this is what Calgary's Chinatown needs to try to stomach every day now. And it's the image that keeps on giving. Why is there a muscular badger? Why does the badger have horns? Why is the guy doing something with the badger horn? Why is she riding the badger? I have more questions. But I feel like that's a good start. I think that's art, right? Who can fathom art? But is this what $120,000 of Calgary tax money should go to? Really? Really? Why are the horns like the same color as the sky? Why does the badger thing have horns? Okay. Here's another mural. Yeah, okay. Just to remember. That's okay. Yeah, makes sense. Moving into a little more serious news, Canada for the first time is being publicly named as one of the countries helping fuel the war in Yemen by a panel of independent experts monitoring the conflict in the United Nations. Don't tell Michelle Rempel, right? She's always talking about the Yemenis. So, we're just funding it. We're just profiting off and using money that is going towards this. Yay. Or giving them money that's going towards that or something to that effect. Funding, right? Fuel the war. I don't know what fuel the war means. Is funding? Is that egging them on? Is that... It's a little... And I don't have a subscription to the Globe and Mail right now, so I'm not going to get into it, but if you want to read about it, let me know what fuel the war means. Is it monetary? Is it just saying, yeah, you continue to have that war? Who knows? I don't know. Here is moving into We. Something doesn't pass the smell test. A charity amasses $50 million in prime real estate, complains that the donations are exceeded by the outflow, now cashing in on the real estate for an endowment and leaving town. There's a big commission being paid to someone here. Forensic audit now. I agree. Here's the global news. Many questions remain about what will happen to We Charity and its sister organization in the We Empire, including its for-profit arm, Me to We. So they're closing down We. And if you looked at yesterday I reported about this, and they had the interview, the CTV interview. Oh, we're just not making enough money. It's a charity, and you own $50 million in real estate. So if you have a couple of down months, you got to retool, right? It seems... This Twitter person makes a good point. It seems like there's a stench to this. It seems like they're getting out of Dodge good and quick, right? And those buildings will be snapped right up. Maybe the government will buy them for condos or something, right? Pierre Poilievre says, We closure changes nothing. Finance committee will resume investigation once Parliament resumes. You can run, but you can't hide. There are places in the world they could hide, I think. And they've got that $50 million. That's nothing to sneeze at currently. Hopefully it won't cost $50 million to buy a loaf of bread in Canada anytime soon. But history is full of examples of exactly that hyperinflation. So I'm not being hyperbolic. I honestly hope that never happens. I hope we never see that. Okay. Here's Joyce Napier. I think that's how you say that. Curb was fast. Wage subsidy was fast. Why wouldn't this other program be rolled out fast? And so she's talking about We, and she's saying we can't investigate we're investigating the Liberals here. And the panel kind of gives her eyes. You know, it's kind of funny to watch Beauclair. He's like, by the end of the interview, he's like, he's speaking very loudly with everything he can without speaking over her. Watch it. It's very funny. I'm probably gonna watch to the end here. Hold on. Here we go.
Remind them perhaps that the investigation is not we, it's about the Liberal government. And that was why there are all these committees. It is not because we want to investigate we, because then let's talk about the Red Cross headquarters. Let's ask ourselves if the Salvation Army owns any real estate. We could start looking into all charities, and perhaps that's what we should do. But you know, there is definitely a pylon, and you know, the Conservative MP saying you can run but you can't hide. Oh, whoa. Why don't we just tone it down here and look at this in a reasonable way and look and see if indeed, you know, there is some wrongdoing.
And at the beginning of this clip, Evan Solomon is well, I might play it too because it's worth watching. Hold on a second. Actually, the combative Evan clip is coming up. It's with Mr. Uppal coming up right next here. But here's Charlie Angus, and he says, the Kielburgers continue to push the false line they gave to our committee that they became embroiled in this controversy because they naively answered the government's call for help. Not true. The documents reveal a sustained lobbying effort by the Kielburgers. And yeah, it's not like they were registered as lobbyists. It's not like they were above board as lobbyists. They had a massive lobbying team, and they were in contact with the finance minister, Bardish Chagger, direct contact with the prime minister and the PMO. Like, these are, if you were a lobbyist, you were looking at what these guys were doing and trying to copy it, right? And what they were doing was ignoring the rules and just sending proposals and getting results. So, I mean, very interesting, but it wasn't we slipped, fell and landed on this $500 million deal, $912 billion deal, or $1 million, $912 million deal, billion, almost $1 billion. They lobbied for it and they got it, right? And then once they realized it was way more than they could chew. They don't speak French. How could they deliver the program in Canada? They're the only entity available in the entire country that can deliver a program, and they don't speak French. Good job, Justin Trudeau. Bravo. Here's the combative Evan clip. This one we're gonna watch the whole way through. And Uppal says I don't believe their naivety, like their pretend naivety. Here we go.
More about this scandal. We Charity is absolutely embroiled in Justin Trudeau's scandal, and they need to immediately provide those documents to the Finance Committee so we can look into this further. But, you know, as we look at, you're saying, how did this happen? And essentially the Liberals use the pandemic as cover to give their friends money. There's no other way to look at it. A simple Google search would have you know, exposed a lot of the problems that we already was having financially. They chose to ignore all that.
To be fair, the Kielburgers have said they weren't going to profit from this. No one was profiting. When you say give their friends money, they say they weren't going to profit of all this. They were trying to. They say that the bureaucracy was the one that said they're the best organization to deliver this program through this this agreement.
I don't believe their naivety at all. Meetings
Evan spends like half the clip. Nobody's profiting off. Who's profiting off this? What's the harm? It's just like punching somebody in the dark, right? It's not a problem. I don't believe their naivete, or their presumed or pretend naivete. It's incredible to watch Evan draw that line, right? Like, oh well, they say they weren't going to profit off this, and he says, he kind of laughs. He's like, it's $1 billion, like even $500 million for what the program was. Please get volunteer people working on something, something. And the proposed plans to get people to volunteer on something looked like an internet troll farm. Like, it looked like an internet click farm meant to push liberals. I was not looking forward to how the Twitterscape looked, because I feel like 7 hours on Twitter pushing woke ideology would have qualified as time into your whatever the Ponzi scheme. So I think that it was funny, this whole exchange. Evan really saying, man, they're not going to profit from this. Like, that's the news guy. That's the guy that you're supposed to trust and believe, right? BS, Evan, BS. And the first time I watched the video, I was saying, Evan, really? Really? Okay, moving into the pandemic and COVID-19. Months into the pandemic, with more to come, Dr. Bonnie Henry will not waver. This is talking about masks and the not mandating them in BC, etc. It's more of an interest piece highlighting her day and all that other stuff. But at the end here, it says, recently, some members of the public, particularly parents and educators, have questioned Henry's advice on at least two key issues: the decision to send kids back to school and not requiring face coverings to be worn in all public places. And she says, that's hard for me to hear because absolutely the most important thing we want to do is have children back in a learning environment and do it safely for everybody, Henry said in response to criticism from the parents. So good for BC for not bowing to the mask mandates. My kids are exempt, and people have asked me how that works. I've been meaning to put up the information, but I've been doing another special report. I hope you're watching it. It's very interesting to do, and the people contacting me have been very nice, and it's been very interesting conversations generated because I've put them up. So essentially, my advice is, and this being buried midway through the video is maybe not helpful, but my advice is basically contact the principal and ask how to access an exemption for the kids. And as far as I understand it, you don't need to provide the reasoning or anything to that effect because of privacy laws. Now, my kids are younger than the provincial mandate, so I don't know what the provincial rules for exemptions are, but I'm sure there are exemptions. So I think that it is important, if you want your kids to have a choice about wearing a mask, or if you want them to be exempt from wearing a mask, to advocate for them, right? They don't know how to advocate for themselves. That's what you're supposed to do as a parent, to teach them how to advocate, and then tell them that you've advocated for them. Say, hey, I called the school, this is what you have to do, or this is what I did to access the exemption, and you can choose to wear a mask at times you want instead of when the school wants, or not at all. And so, yeah, it's something you can access. I'm sorry that I don't have the information about above grade 3, but again, I'm sure that there are exemptions. I'm sure they have to write exemptions because exemptions exist. So those exemptions need to be accommodated within the scope of the mandatory masks, right? Even mandatory masks, countywide, according to the public health, has clear exemptions. And one of those exemptions is prevents the person from breathing easily in any way at all. That's the exemption 2. So the exemptions exist. All you have to do is ask. Okay? And you have permission to ask. Go. Make the phone call today. Make it right now. Make it before lunch. Okay. University of Waterloo professor calls pandemic COVID fake emergency. See, interesting. This stuff is coming out. And this is a bit of a struggle session for the University of Waterloo. So here it is. A chemistry professor at the University of Waterloo has distributed a course outline to students saying his in-class exams aren't mandatory because of the COVID fake emergency. The goal of Michael Palmer's biochemical pharmacology course is to, quote, gain an in-depth understanding of biochemical principles of drug action. Palmer received a medical degree with a specialization in microbiology from a university in Germany, although he said in an email to CBC he has not sought or received accreditation in Canada. The course outline was posted on social media after it was distributed to students this week. In a statement to CBC News, University of Waterloo's Dean of Science Robert Lemieux said Palmer's opinion doesn't align with the university's perspective. The University of Waterloo respects the academic freedom of our faculty to express their opinions. This representation is not, however, shared by the University of Waterloo or the Faculty of Science, said the statement. Our response to the COVID-19 pandemic will continue to be based on the best available advice from public health officials. The statement went on to say, in this case, the professor has elected to move the course online. In an email, Palmer said he would not comment on the course outline. And here's the course. It says, because of the fake emergency, in-classroom exams cannot be made mandatory. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that the University of Waterloo is allowing people to express their opinion this way, especially teachers. I will follow this story, and if he gets fired in the short term, I'll let you know, because that's kind of how these things have been going recently, isn't it? Here's Lethbridge. I reported on this yesterday as the people storming into the city council meeting to express their displeasure. Here's the 80 or so anti-mask protesters gathering in the city hall to protest against the bylaw that the city passed, and that's their right. I hope that it has an impact. There's a lot of people talking about how ineffective masks are at controlling respiratory viruses, etc. There's doctors who are being silenced about this. There's all sorts of conversation, and it's very, very interesting that even something with as much robust science behind it as the masking issue, and if you take 2020 out of the equation, there's like 30 years of masking science talking about efficacy and use of masks in medical settings and non-medical settings, all sorts of stuff, policy level science, policy creation level science, stuff that policymakers look at and go, yeah, that makes sense. With controlled testing and peer-reviewed papers, etc. So the idea that, in a month, all of the mask science is just gone and replaced with 2020, we found out that masks work and now they're mandatory. Deal with it. Like, it's concerning. And I know I've been saying that a lot, but there's a lot of concerning things. So good for them. Good for them. Good job, everyone, for protesting. I still feel strongly, I'm gonna talk about this really quick. I still feel strongly that Canadians need a better way to protest, because Canada is so big. Even if you have a majority of the population, you can't get that majority of the population into the capital city, right? We couldn't all go to Ottawa, even if we all wanted to, right? Like, your families are going to be at home in BC or Alberta or Saskatchewan or Manitoba, right? Or St. John's or the other way, Halifax, etc. But we need a way to express our displeasure in a way that the government or the people in charge, the MPs, the MPPs, etc. And MPPs are a little different because you can protest. You're all together for your province, right? You could potentially get everybody to your capital city in a province, but the MPs are not listening, and it's hard to communicate the will of the people when. Well, I mean, when you look at a year's worth of Saturdays, right? More than a year's worth of Saturdays for the Yellow Vests in France, and that got nothing done. Macron's still in power, right? So how do you meaningfully protest in a world where the ruling party of the government is marching left, ignoring the citizenry, and doing it and using the press to legitimize their actions, saying, well, look at all this racism the press says, and look at all what the people are demanding as the press says, right? And it's faulty, it's false, it's fake news. So, but they're using it to legitimize their moves, and it's very, very frustrating. So how do you meaningfully say, no, this is not what we want, this is not accurate, this is not a march towards what we want? How do you say that? How do you do that? How do you do that effectively in that world? I don't know. I don't know. And combine that with Twitter censoring people who are on the right, Facebook censoring people who are on the right. I'm not on Facebook anymore because what's the point? I put my videos up on Facebook because they don't delete them, I suppose. But I don't spend time on Facebook because I wouldn't go hang out in that bar. I wouldn't give that bar money, right? So I don't know. It's toxic. It doesn't help me do anything, right? Stopping Facebook started me producing these videos. Okay, so that's the amount of time we're talking about. And not directly. I do other things, right? I stopped Facebook. I stopped other things. It's not a direct apples to apples comparison, but it's part of the reason. And it's toxic. So they control the conversation. How do you combat the geographical limitations plus the corruption of the press plus the corruption of the major discussion platforms in across the West, the Twitter, the Facebook, these places where people are meant to congregate are being smashed. Your group has 100,000 members. Well, now you're making a splash, so disband it because it's a white supremacist group. Done. Magic, right? So how do we fight? People need to be thinking about this. Like, am I the only? And yesterday I asked, am I the only one who sees the crazy? And I'm very glad that there are a lot of people in the comments. Thank you for saying that. No, you're not the only person who sees the crazy. This is nuts. I feel like I'm also the only person who sees that we need to change our tactic because the tactic that we're using is not working. So how do we meaningfully do this? Are there people talking about this? Can I talk to them? Do you know who they are? If you know who they are, tell me, because I'd love to talk to them. I think I've got some ideas. My ideas aren't half bad sometimes, but maybe they think they are. Who knows? Anyway, if you know who they are, let me know. Maybe we could become them. Email me. My emails are around. Okay, moving on. Justin Trudeau has agreed to hold a virtual First Ministers meeting on federal health care transfers to the provinces and territories. More money to put on the big federal deficit, and it is a big federal deficit. I would love to see the numbers for 2020 because I've heard lots that the hospitals have been empty for the most part. I've heard that they've been running at 70% capacity and that people have been laid off and because there's no work or there's not enough work. So I'd really love to understand where the money's going, what it's going for. Ventilators, are we even close to being low on ventilators? I don't think we've had any delivered, despite Blacklock's reporter reporting quite a lot of money being spent on ventilators that are not recognized to be used internationally or anything to that effect, just being made. And again, I don't think we're even at the top of our capacity. So it seems like I'd love an understanding of the accounting of it all, but I feel like we've spent, the province has spent a lot of money, the feds have spent a lot of money. Could you really argue against more spending at this point in time? Like, I just don't. And I mean, does it really? If the provinces are screaming, we need more money, and the federal government's saying, fire up those printing machines, let's get those provinces some money. Well, reference my earlier hyperinflation comment of, I hope that $50 million is worth more than a loaf of bread soon, right? Here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says, we were told the massive run-up in spending since Trudeau took office would help the poor, yet since he took office, the poverty gap worsened, and that was before COVID. Could it be that this big government hurts rather than helps the poorest? Could it be? Quarter of Canadians. Okay, here's the real headline. 75% of Canadians comfortable with voting in person. But these 25% get the headline because that's better, according to the National Post. Quarter of Canadians, say the National Post, uncomfortable with voting in person during COVID-19. Oh no, those quarter of Canadians. Maybe they could stay home. Maybe they could stay home if they're so scared. Okay, here's Maxime Bernier, and he says, more systemic racism from Liberals. I like this take. I thought it was funny. Health Minister Patty Haydu, a privileged white woman with power, to use the leftist jargon, say Black Canadians are more likely to suffer from mental health issues. Or perhaps he's talking about her boss, blackface Justin Trudeau. And this is Patty Haydu. She says, more Canadians than ever are reaching out for mental health support, including many people who are disproportionately impacted, like Black Canadians. Wait a second. Black Canadians are disproportionately affected by mental health issues? Okay. This funding will help tackle the systemic challenges and barriers faced by these communities. Again, I say the racializing of support and the racializing of the carving up and saying this group is more likely to experience X, and so we're giving them Y support. How about if you experience X, we're providing Y support? Would that not achieve the same goal if just by virtue of supporting X and a majority of people who suffer from X are Black, would that not achieve the same thing and cut out the racist BS? Would it not? Like, am I missing something? Please do tell me if I am. Okay, moving on. Here is Alberta, Jason Kenney saying, we're not going to micromanage our way out. Kenny shuts down the idea of more COVID-19 restrictions in Alberta. Good job, Jason Kenney. Yay. So we've got BC at the beginning and Jason Kenney also saying, no more restrictions. Here is Patty Haydu telling Doug Ford that he has to enforce the quarantine rules using the OPP. Like, the OPP can do this too, Doug Ford. But here's Laurie Goldstein pointing out the hypocrisy here. Trudeau Liberals make up rules as they go along. Remember Trudeau saying he couldn't tell the RCMP to remove railway blockades because he couldn't tell police what to do. Now, Patty Haydu tells Ford to tell the OPP to enforce the Federal Quarantine Act. In the real world, as opposed to Trudeau world, governments tell police what to do all the time. What they can't do in democracies is interfere in police operations. That is how police do what the government tells them to do, such as removing blockades or enforcing the Quarantine Act. Here's the article. Health Minister Patty Haydu fired back at Ontario Premier Doug Ford on Thursday, reminding him that provincial police can enforce quarantine rules too. Her comments come after the Premier lambasted the quarantine system as broken in a Wednesday press conference, saying federal health officers aren't laying charges against Quarantine Act rule breakers. I'll just remind Premier Ford that in fact the OPP who are participating in enforcing the quarantine with the RCMP have full authority to lay charges, Haydu told CTV Power Play host Evan Solomon during Thursday's episode. So I would encourage him to speak with the Ontario Provincial Police and tell them that if they feel that charges are appropriate, that they should go ahead and use the Quarantine Act as they've been empowered to do. Haydu also pointed out that vast majorities of COVID-19 spread is happening within communities as opposed to being brought into Canada by an outside source. Here's an article from yesterday, September 9th, 2020. Coronavirus exposure identified on 13 more Montreal flights. I just Googled really quick, flights COVID-19. The last couple of days, the last couple of weeks, there's been daily news articles about this. I don't have the numbers or whatever to compare that to, but the Liberals like to just make up their own truth because, the truth that you believe in the limousine on the way to whatever presser that you're doing is truth enough for the Liberals, right? And they don't answer questions they don't like. So that's just the little mantras they repeat to themselves, and they repeat until they believe it, right? Because that's what Minister McKenna said. That's how they run the House of Commons. I'm sure they've got a little page of things to say, and they just say them over and over until, it's just by rote, right? Like, you don't have to answer the question. Just say this talking point. That's all you have to do. You're a Liberal after all. Here's the Prime Minister announcement. It says Prime Minister to hold cabinet retreat in Ontario. So that'll be over from the 15th or the 14th and 15th. As the world continues to face the ongoing threat and impacts of the global pandemic, the cabinet retreat will focus on maintaining vigilance across the country to protect Canadians from COVID-19 and ensure they're supported through this global health and economic emergency. So they're going to be planning their throne speech. Previously, they were asking for any kind of ideas at all from the Liberal caucus, which is a departure for this government. Usually it's top down, but in this situation, they're asking their cabinet, or the caucus, excuse me. Caucus is everyone. Cabinet is the people in charge of the portfolios. Okay. Morneau guilty. Morneau is the former finance minister and Will Ferrell lookalike, right? Guilty of breaking the Elections Act to boost Liberal candidate. The Trudeau Liberals have been found guilty of using government resources to help elect one of their own. The penalty, though, barely amounts to a slap on the wrist. In a decision released Thursday, Yves Cote, the Commissioner of Canada Elections, found that former Finance Minister Bill Morneau used government events hosted by his ministry to promote Liberal candidates. The events happened in the lead up to the election as part of Morneau's official government duties. Scroll down. Given that these were all official government events, Morneau was found in contravention of the Canada Election Act. As punishment, he is required to pay a $300 fine and publish the findings of the Commissioner on Ethics on his personal website or social media channels. Morneau, who resigned as Finance Minister and MP for Toronto Centre last month, is still under investigation by the Ethics Commissioner for his role in the WE scandal. Just in case you're not sure, $300 is not going to bankrupt Mr. Morneau. Mr. Morneau is married to the McCain heiress, but Morneau Chappelle makes like $200,000 a month or something like that, $175,000 a month. Somebody had that figure out on Twitter underneath. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Mr. Morneau can easily afford that $300 fine. And it's kind of insulting, really. Like, oh, and I mean, politics is meant to be geared toward a regular Canadian. And if you make a mistake, mistakes happen, right? And you shouldn't be bankrupt for it. But a $300 fine just seems, I don't know. It seems toothless, right? Like toothless. Maybe no fine at all. Maybe exclusion from future political appointments from municipal to federal. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I don't know. Here's a concerning story. This is way at the end of the video. It's a long video. It's really concerning. This would be a lead in a normal day, right? Like there's so much going on. It's crazy. And I know the Black Lives Matter thing, but the horns. Really? Okay, here it is. Liberals want internet regulations, digital sales tax, massive new powers for the CRTC to regulate payments from online services and mandate CanCon contributions, and new requirements for internet platforms to pay licensing fees for links to news. Now, I wanted to point that out. I run CanadaReport.co, and that's my scratch pad. That's kind of where I put my ideas for things. And yeah, that's what it looks like. And this is where I build my shows. And if I have to pay a per link thing, like it's almost tailor made to shut down this kind of stuff. And I mean, Twitter's all about links. Facebook's all about links. It's not just me that's all about links, but man, like how would I even put up the due diligence of my show if I have to pay per link that links to news? Like they're trying to destroy Discord. They're doing it in a way that makes it impossible for anybody like me to even tell you what's going on because it would be too costly. Cost would be prohibitive. The only thing that I could do is move my server and myself outside of Canada and not be bound by those laws. But as I'm in Canada, I would be bound by those laws. And so, is this appropriate? Well, I mean, it'll certainly achieve what they want to achieve, won't it? It'll shut people up that they want shut up. And through a pious, oh, well, you're breaking the law, sir. I'm not censoring you. You're ignoring this very important internet law. And they'll package it up as like internet freedom and responsibility. Oh, everything should be free, but some things people say is awful and should be censored. So it'll go through this firewall just like China. Welcome to China 2.0. And they're moving to do this. This is in real time. This is happening. If the Liberals win a majority in the next election, and I'll tell you, the scandals be darned. If you look at the polling and the number of people who support these lefties, the lefty politics, it's wild. I'm not confident that Trudeau won't win. I'm not confident that O'Toole won't go exactly and do the same thing. So, one way or the other, I think we're pooched. So this is the same article as talked about with Bernier earlier. Basically, it's interesting that well, I talked about it earlier, so I'm not going to talk about it again. We're already long. Thanks for watching, everybody. Internet regulation is an awful idea. The Liberals don't have any ideas left. They're just going to spend. Remember when Kathleen Wynne promised the moon? Like, we're going to have two-way, full-time railway service everywhere. We're going to spend money on education. We're going to do everything you want and more, and everybody's going to be happy when the utopia is ushered in. This is where Trudeau is at, and people are buying it. That's the problem. They think that this is the right pathway for our country. And I mean, you can't turn off the taps just like that, right? The spending that they've done. But there's a lot of irresponsible spending. There's a lot of irresponsible spending that's been sent out of the country. There's a lot of irresponsible spending that's been done in special groups that shouldn't be done on special groups. It should be done for all Canadians in the form of tax reduction instead of specialized targeted stimulus. And if people need help, then you should define the help that you're willing to give, and anybody who needs that help should get it, not based on skin color. If you're a business owner and you want to have access to a business loan, say, and you're just not black enough, well, that's racist. And it's unfortunate that our leadership and the media don't seem to see that. And so, you know, I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go. Like, this has been one wild ride since 2018, and it seems like we're picking up speed. Have you seen Christmas Vacation? Yeah. Somebody's waxed the sled. So I don't know. That's it for today, but certainly not it for a lot of these stories. A lot of these stories, we're either going headlong into an election or we're going into a throne speech that's going to be turning us left with a finance minister who's close friends with George Soros, and that's not anti-Semitic. That's anti-gaming the monetary system from the hedge fund billionaire who has a history of that, right? A finance minister who's best friends with George Soros and who doesn't have any finance minister experience. But trust us, she's talked to lots of people who would know. Really trust us? Get lost. Get bent. Unbelievable. So that's where we're at in Canadian politics. And are the Conservatives strong enough to stop that from happening? If that happens, if the Conservatives come in and they pull austerity or they pull Canada back from the brink from all of this spending, is the GST going to go up? Are the taxes going to go up? Income tax, taxing the sale of your home? Like, there are ideas to pay for this in a way that doesn't hurt the day-to-day Canadian, but there are other factors: the immigration factor, the wages factor, inflation, all sorts of other stuff that are contributing to problems. People are exiting Toronto, but the prices of real estate are still continuing to climb. Foreign investment, all of this stuff is, I don't know if coming to a head, but when you take the debt of a country and that has $20 billion debt, right? We had $20 billion debt as a federal entity in Canada, and make it all of a sudden $300 billion, and like overnight, essentially within the scale of a chart, right? Like it's like, then that's very difficult. That's a very difficult hole to build, to dig out of. All of a sudden, that changes the dynamic completely from the country. Now you're dealing with a whole different set of problems, and the $20 billion deficit can't easily be dismissed, right? Or the $1 billion deficit, the $100 billion deficit can't be as easily dismissed as the $20 billion deficit, right? So it changes it by a factor of the massive debt, right? So it's a much bigger problem to solve now. And that changes the conversation necessarily. And I don't know that our politicians have even caught up to that. It doesn't look like they have. So anyway, that's enough out of me. I'm going to go do my videos for the Epigram board, video 4 today, and we might get to the end of the emails and into the trustee story or into the comparison between the 2017 to 19 equity plan and the 2019 to 2022 equity plan. The 2019 to 2022 equity plan is racist and uses undefined words. So, and using undefined words like toxic masculinity, anti-racism, et cetera, is problematic, because then you can just assign the word any meaning you want in any situation and say, well, you're being anti-racist, or whatever, however you would use that term. And so this punishment is demanded by our current woke ideology. So that's the problem with undefined words, right? And that's why you can't have that kind of stuff in policy. And that's why it's problematic that the Upper Grand District School Board continues to have that stuff in their policy. Man, this is a long video. I can't just stop talking. I apologize. But now we're at the end. So thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful